Blog Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ne ye APOO AFAHYE da, medinde Odwirafo, Kwesi, Nehem, Ptah, Akhan, Akwamuman, Amaruka, Atifi mu, Odwirafo, Odwiraman mu. Greetings to all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, people, many Africans, black people. Today is APOO AFAHYE Day. My name is Odwirafo, Kwesi, Nehem, Ptah, Akhan, Odwirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America within Odwiraman, the purified nation, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say we thank you once again for tuning into the broadcast. Tonight is actually a special broadcast. We have 4 broadcasts on a weekly basis on Joda, Benada, Awukuda, and Yauda, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Tonight is a special broadcast, a special Awukuda. The APOO observance, the 13-day observance dealing with the ritual purification, ritual purging for self and society, spiritually and communally, takes place around April here in the Western Hemisphere within Akwamuman, Amaruka, Atifi, the Akwamu Nation in North America. We observe the 13-day APOO observance based on our own ancestral calendar, so we therefore calibrate our APOO festival with the spring equinox, the Fefeo Bere, the beautiful time, the spring equinox coming up on the 20th and so forth. We are therefore in the midst of our APOO celebration observance. So for that reason, number one, that's one of the reasons we wanted to have this special broadcast. Number 2 is because today, Awusida, Sunday, is the day that's connected to Awusi and Etsi, Ausar and Auset, when they operate in harmony with the Ra and Ra'et, and therefore our major spirits animating the Aten, the Atenit, the sun. On Joda Mondays, Ausar and Auset operating as Ajo and Ajua operate through the Oxurane, operate through the moon. So both days, Ausar and Auset, when they're operating in harmony with Ra and Ra'et, they operate through the sun. When they're operating alone, they're operating through the moon on Joda Monday night. Because this is the first day of the week with regard to APOO, the first Sunday or Awusida, a day of Ausar and Auset during our 13-day APOO observance. And yesterday was the new moon, which is, of course, connected to Ajo and Ajua, Ausar and Auset. We wanted to have this specific broadcast dealing with fertility in connection with Ausar and Auset, fertility of the second resurrection. We wanted to talk about this notion of the second resurrection, its relationship to fertility in connection with Ausar and Auset, and also in that context, the ritual purification that's going on during this time around the spring equinox, and also dealing not only with our APOO observance, but also, of course, with our upcoming AKYISAN Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference, which is this coming weekend, March 25th, which is Awusida Sunday, next Sunday. That is the last day of our 13-day APOO observance. And we are having our AKYISAN conference, the 3rd annual conference, on the last day of the observance, which is March 25th. And it's going to be from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. here in Washington, D.C., and we're going to get into information regarding that. So this is why we call this broadcast APOO Ne AKYISAN, the APOO observance, our 13-day observance, and AKYISAN Ancestral Religious Reversion, Ausar Auset, the fertility of the second resurrection. So typically on Joda, we have Monday nights, we have Akhanfo Nanasom, ancient authentic Akhan ancestral religion, where we deal specifically with the Akhan expression of ancestral religion, rooted in our ancestral blood circles, our ancestral origins are in ancient Khanat, so-called Nubia. We migrated some of our people from that region after the fall of Kemet in northern Khanat reestablished the Akhan Empire, the Ghana Empire in the western part of the continent. Hundreds of years later, we migrated further south and reestablished Akhan civilization in the savanna and forest belt regions. And then hundreds of years subsequent to that, some of our people were forced from those regions into North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe during the Musul Kessie, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. This is how Akhan people ended up in the Western Hemisphere. But we maintained our ancestral religious practices. Thus, Akhan ancestral religion is called Winti in Suriname, South America, from the Akhan term Quinti. It is called Obia in Jamaica, from the Akhan term Obaye. In North America and the United States, Akhan ancestral religion is called Hoodoo, from the Akhan term Undu, meaning medicine from roots, trees, plant life, but also meaning to become heavy with the spirit through spirit possession, spirit communication. And we find these same definitions of the language of ancient Khanid and Kemet in the Medusa, the hieroglyphs, Undu meaning medicine from roots, trees, plant life, root work, and so forth, but also meaning to become heavy with the spirit through spirit possession, spirit communication. It also means the offerings we give to the deities and ancestral spirits, the Undu, on the shrines and so forth. So that's what we deal with on Monday nights, ancient authentic Akhan ancestral religion based on our ancestrally inherited traditions. On Tuesday night, Abinada, we have ODWIRA, purification, where we deal with ancestral religion in general, not just the Akhan expression, but ancestral religion in general, how it impacts every aspect of our lives. Ancestral religion, Afurakani, or African ancestral religion, no matter what form it takes, wherever we exist in the world, including the Western Hemisphere, in essence is defined as the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That means through ritual we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and thus realign ourselves with divine order. So the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance, these are the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion. We seek to align every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day. That is our way of life. That is our culture. As Afurakani people, when we make legitimate mistakes, we engage the ritual process to incorporate law and restore balance so that we can get back on track with executing our divine function in creation and aligning every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day. So this is how ancestral religion impacts every aspect of our lives. So we deal with the purification of concepts, culture, cosmology, and so forth on the ODWIRA broadcast. On our Wukuda Wednesday night, we have Egwa Marketplace, where we showcase Afuraitkaitnit businesses, organizations, and institutions, those who are serving the Afuraitkaitnit community, those who maintain their ancestral religious values, which inform their service to the community. And on Yauda Thursday night, we have Sim Affairs of the Nation, where we deal with specific issues confronting us as an Oman, as a nation, specifically as Odwiraman, the purified nation, Afuraitkaitnit people in the Western Hemisphere. We have an Amaniye approach, a nationist approach to dealing with our issues. We deal with Amaniye nationism, the purification of nationalism. Nationism recognizes the proper understanding and definition of what an Oman, a nation, is, which is a living, breathing entity governed by specific forces in nature, and we are cells within that organal structure. So we need to operate harmoniously with one another as Afuraitkaitnit people, but also with the divinity that governs that organal structure of which that living, breathing nation is, that entity is. We have been drawn into the Western Hemisphere in a specific region of the Western Hemisphere by our ancestresses and ancestors to coalesce in a specific region, to blend ancestral blood circles in this region of the Earth Mother's body, to interface with the unique expression of the Earth Mother divinities in this region, the Western region of her body, of the planet and so forth, dealing with the unique expression of the Aboso Marisha Vodou, the deities as they manifest in the Western region of the Earth Mother's body, blending ancestral blood circles, taking in plant life, animal life, mineral life for food and medicine in this region, and dealing with the spirit totems of plant life, animal life, and mineral life of this region. So that allowed us to forge a locative identity rooted in our blending of ancestral blood circles in this region of the Earth Mother's body, and therefore we have a unique expression of ancestral culture, religion, ritual practice, and so forth, and our approach to solving our issues from an Amaniye nationist approach. We're talking about nationism, the purification of nationalism. Nationism meaning nationalism rooted in our ancestral religious values, a holistic approach to nation building, restoration. So that's what we deal with on the Yauda Amain Sim Affairs of the Nation broadcast on a weekly basis. But tonight's special broadcast, APOO AFAHYE, dealing with the APOO observance and AFAHYE Ancestral Religious Reversion. So when we talk about our upcoming conference, AFAHYE Ancestral Religious Reversion, Chi means back and sign means return in the Akhan language, but also the language of ancient Kemet and Kanat. When we talk about reversion, that's different from conversion. When you're converting someone to a pseudo-religious practice, you must convert them because you have to force them to embrace something that naturally they would never embrace on their own. So that's what conversion is about. AKYISAN or reversion means to return back to your original pristine state, your original condition, the nature in which you were created by the Creator and Creatress Ra and Ra'et under the direction of Amen and Amenet, the great Father and Great Mother, Supreme Being. So we return to our natural culture, our inherited ancestral religious practices that were born of our blood circles, preserved in our blood circles, not only on the continent of Afuraitkaitnit, but into the Western Hemisphere. We still communicate with our same ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated of our direct blood circles, inclusive of those who are made their transition recently, as well as hundreds of years ago, as well as thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of years ago. They are all part of our blood circle, our direct great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers going back thousands of years. The same individuals who established civilization, ancestral religious practice, and so forth, we still have them in our blood circle, so we can never lose our tradition. We still become possessed by the forces in nature, the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, the Ntoro, no matter where we go in the world, where we were forced to migrate into the world. We still are connected by blood and spirit possession to the forces in nature. Therefore, we are born into the world with our own ancestral religious practice that has been transmitted intergenerationally and transcarnationally through successive reincarnations in our blood circles wherever we have gone. So we have maintained our ancestral religious traditions intact. Here in North America, we are not dependent on anyone outside of our direct ancestral blood circles to practice our ancestral religions. We don't have to travel to the continent, the Caribbean, or anywhere else for initiations. We have maintained our priesthoods and priestesshoods in Hoodoo, which is Akhan ancestral religion, Juju, which is Yoruba ancestral religion, Voodoo, which is Ebe and Fon ancestral religion, here in North America for hundreds of years since we first arrived here. And of course, we utilize these ancestral religious traditions to empower and guide us to wage war against the whites and their offspring and force the end of enslavement in the United States. So we deal with that in the AKYISAN Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference. That's coming up this weekend, March 25th, on Sunday. We will be presenting on Hoodoo, the Akhan ancestral religion in North America. Voodoo Queen Kalinda Laveau will be presenting on Voodoo, ancestral Voodoo, Ebe tradition, born of the blood circles of our people in North America before the Haitian migration into Louisiana. Voodoo was already in Louisiana. Wakili Oyinola will be presenting on Juju, the Yoruba tradition in North America, born of the blood circles of our people who maintained that tradition for hundreds of years in North America. So that's coming up. So when we're talking about reversion, ancestral religious reversion, this is what we're dealing with, reverting back to our originally maintained, established, and preserved traditions of our blood circles. So APOO AFAHYE, that purification process, but also that ancestral religious reversion process, is directly related to this new moon cycle, and also Ausar and Auset and their fusion. And when they fuse together for the birth of Heru, the conception of Heru and so forth, but also that's part of that first resurrection. But then there's a fusion once again for that second resurrection. So we're talking about here the fertility of the second resurrection. Even if you look at the first balancing point of the year, for us, our New Year celebration begins in September at the autumn equinox, Atimet equinox, around September 22nd or 23rd, depending on the year. That is the end of the warm cycle, the harvest time, but it's also the beginning of the cool cycle, but it's also the seeding time. You harvest the fruits of your labor and so forth, and there's a celebration, but then it's also time to take those seeds and plant them. That is a conception. And then, of course, the seeds germinate, and the roots come out and go deep down within the soil during the dark, cool portion of the year around the winter solstice and so forth, but then the sprouts begin to rise up through the soil, and at some point they break through the surface of the soil and so forth, and the sprouts manifest around the spring, and what manifests at spring breaking through the surface of the soil is a revelation of what was taking place in the quote-unquote underworld. So the conception took place at the balancing point, the evening point, the autumn equinox, and then that birth takes place at the spring equinox, that manifestation, that sprouting. So there's a conception that takes place. The seed going into the soil is a conception that takes place in September, but then you also have another process. You have another fertility process, a fusion process that takes place around this time. Now, when we look at the story of Ausar, Auset, and Heru, and when you look at this image that we use for the broadcast, for the promotional image of the broadcast, this is an image from the temple of Seti the First, and this temple or tomb of Seti the First is in Amju, or so-called Abydos, one of the major sanctuaries in ancient Kemet. So you see this image of Ausar, and when you see the full image we place, and when you see this full image, what you will see is not only Ausar laying on the funerary bed, and then you see the bird, that animal totem of Auset, in this particular form, the form of a falcon. Ausar is erect, and the spirit bird is hovering over his kate or ka. That is one of the terms for phallus in ancient Kemet. The term for soul is ka for male, ka'et for female, but then the phallus and vagina are also named after the soul, so they are also called ka and ka'et. So the soul, the deity dwelling in the head region, is called ka for males. It is called ka'et for females, but then the phallic organ for males is also called ka, named after the soul. The vagina is called the ka'et or kat, and in English that's cat, named after the feminine term for soul as well. So you see the ka, the phallus of Ausar erect, and Auset in the form through her animal totem, that sacred falcon, is hovering over the phallic symbol for a fusion to take place. Now, what's key in this particular representation, if you see the entire representation, we know the story of Ausar, Auset, and Heru. We know that Ausar is killed. Eventually, his body is found and so forth. Auset connects with Ausar. Her spirit connects with his spirit. She becomes impregnated so she can conceive her son Heru. Her and Ausar's son Heru. Heru grows up to wage war against Set and his followers so he can restore the nation of Ausar and Auset and so forth. And Heru rules the nation in the physical realm, and Ausar and Auset become the rulers in the spirit realm and so forth. And that's part of that process. So that first conception or that first resurrection of Ausar When his body is found and so forth, Auset remembers him or reconnects him and so forth, places the body parts together so that she can fuse together with him, so she can give birth, conceive Heru and give birth to Heru and so forth. That is the first resurrection, quote unquote, the first resurrection of Ausar. Now, in this particular representation, when you see this, they often talk about Auset taking the form of a sacred animal totem of a bird and hovering over the body of Ausar to conceive Heru. And that is one of those manifestations. But in this particular representation, they always assume that's what's taking place. But if you see the entire scene, of course, you see Ausar laying on the bed. He's erect. The symbol, animal totem of Auset in the form of a falcon is hovering over right next to her head. The Medutu that spell out her name, Auset, so you know that is her representation. However, if you look at the full scene, and there are many scenes like this, and Kemet, this is just one of them, at the foot of the funerary bed, Heru is standing there, and he's full grown. He's a full-grown man with the head of a falcon. And at the head of the bed, Auset is standing there. So clearly, in this particular representation, and many others like it, this cannot represent Auset becoming impregnated with Heru to conceive Heru, because Heru is fully grown, standing at the foot of the bed, watching this process. And Auset herself is standing at the head of the bed. So this is not talking about the original conception or conceiving of Heru when Auset finds the body of Ausar and her spirit unites with his to copulate spiritually, to draw out his essence so that she can become impregnated to give birth to Heru. Heru is already born. He's fully grown. He's standing at the foot of the bed. So what are we looking at when we're looking at this piece? That's very key. And many of our people simply repeat what the white snare offspring say, and many of the white snare offspring Egyptologists will say this represents the conception of Heru by Ausar and Auset. So we just simply repeat that, even though Heru is standing right there full grown. However, the texts bear out what's actually taking place, a number of different texts. First and foremost, when we talk about Ausar being killed, his body being cut up into a number of pieces by Set and scattered, and eventually Auset, along with other divinities, come and pull the different pieces of Ausar's body together and reconstitute his body. His spirit is drawn back into that shrine that they have reconstituted his physical body, and therefore her spirit can unite with his spirit and draw out his essence so she can become impregnated and so forth. That story, of course, is told throughout the various texts of ancient Kemet, going back to the so-called Meru texts or pyramid texts, which are the earliest religious compositions in existence in the world, but then all the way going to the late period, the late dynasties and so forth, the same story is told. However, when the Greeks come into prominence, they put forward the notion that Ausar's body was cut only into 14 pieces and is connected with the 28-day cycle of the moon, and the halfway point is the 14 days and so forth. They associate the 14 pieces with the 14 days and so forth, and they also state that one of the pieces was never found, which was the phallus, because it was swallowed by a fish after being thrown in the river, and therefore Auset had to make an artificial phallus in a magical fashion to complete the 14 pieces of his body, and therefore she was able to copulate with Ausar and conceive Heru. In the text of ancient Kemet, the Medutu, the hieroglyphic text prior to the Greek period, it's not 14 pieces that are delineated, it's 16 pieces that are delineated. And of course, for those who know who Awusi or Ausar is, he's called Obatala in Yoruba, Dangbe in Vodun, Awusi in the Akhan tradition. Of course, you know those 16 pieces of Ausar's body are those Erin Dilogun, or the 16 major Odu that are drawn together through divination and so forth. This is where that original 16 comes from, whether it's in the Ifa divination system in the Yoruba tradition, the Fa divination system in Vodun, Afa in the Igbo tradition, and many other divination systems around the continent of Afuraitkai, dealing with 16 divisions. So, 16 pieces first and foremost, not 14. Secondly, when they talk about the phallus of Ausar or the ka of Ausar being thrown in the water and consumed by a fish, and therefore there were only 13 remaining pieces, and Auset had to fashion the 14th piece, the artificial ka or phallus, to make him complete, that is inaccurate also. Because in the text of Kemet, all the various parts of the body were found, all 16 pieces were found, and there were shrines set up in temples in every part of the country, all 16 sanctuaries of the country where the body parts were found. So there are 16 sanctuaries, 16 shrine spaces representing the 16 parts of the body, those sacred areas of the country where that sacred part of his body were found. Temples were established in that space, and shrines were established in that space. All 16 body parts were found. Specifically, the sanctuary of the shrine that contained the ka or the phallus of Ausar is called Het Benu, a sanctuary within Anu, a so-called Heliopolis. That's borne out in the text of ancient Kemet. So why did the Greeks say, number one, there were only 14 pieces that the body was carved up into, and then secondly, the 14th piece, the phallus, was thrown into the water, consumed by a fish, and she had to manufacture an artificial one because they mixed up the story of Anpu and Basa, the tale of the two brothers that goes back to the so-called Middle Kingdom. In that story, the younger brother, he was castrated, his phallus was cut off and thrown in the river and consumed by a fish, and therefore they conflated that story with the story of Ausar, Auset, and Heru, and they misconstrued it. So it's never been accurate. So when our people, unfortunately, many of our quote-unquote scholars, authors, teachers, and so forth, some teaching just basic history and so forth, or culture, some teaching pseudo-metaphysics and so forth, these individuals, many have been teaching for 20 years, 30 years, going around the country, different parts of the world. They've been telling people that the body of Ausar was cut up into 14 pieces, which is inaccurate. It's actually 16 pieces. They've been telling people that the 14th piece was thrown into the river, which was the phallus, and was never found, and Auset had to manufacture the 14th piece, which is totally inaccurate. It was actually found, the sanctuary it was found, and the name of the shrine, where it was found, and so forth, which is the Het Benu in the sanctuary of Anu, so-called Heliopolis, borne out in the text. And then people even manufacture some pseudo-philosophical reason for why there were only 13 pieces, and the 14th piece is the Tekken, and that's found in the Washington Monument as the Tekken representing the 14th missing piece of Ausar. And that's where there are 13 colonies and 13 branches on the, branch that the, bird is holding on the back of the dollar bill and all these different things, and 13 stones within the pyramid, because the missing piece was the 14th, and that's the, representative of the third eye that people are missing. That entire pseudo-philosophy or philosophical foundation for why there were only 13 pieces as opposed to 14 is 100% inaccurate. First of all, the Tekken, or the so-called obelisk, doesn't represent the phallus of Ausar. In the traditional sense, that represents the quote-unquote Ka, or phallus of Geb, who governs the crust of the earth. And of course, Nut is the atmosphere, and they are husband and wife. It doesn't represent the phallus of Ausar first and foremost. That's the phallus of Ausar's father, which is Geb. Secondly, the phallus of Ausar, the Ka of Ausar, was never lost. It was never thrown in the river. It was actually found. And thirdly, there were 16 pieces and not 14. This information is not new. This information has always been there. It's in books and texts that anybody could have accessed over the past 100 years. Any one of the teachers who've been going around teaching this, whether it was from a basic history perspective or a cultural perspective or a pseudo-metaphysical perspective, They could have simply looked at basic texts that all of them have and found this information, but because they were simply repeating what the whites and their offspring said instead of looking at the text themselves, they've been misinforming our people here in this country and around the world, doing videos, writing books, presentations, trips to Kemet, and so forth, misinforming our people for decades. But when you practice ancestral religion and you're actually dealing directly with these deities, they manifest in the various traditions, Akhan, Yoruba, Ebe, Fon, Igbo, Basa, Fula, Fang, and so forth, in the Hoodoo, Juju, Voodoo, Wanga, Greek traditions in North America, and so forth. When you're dealing directly with these divinities, they don't allow you to just repeat things about them. They communicate with us directly through spirit possession, spirit communication. So when you have a relationship with them, and then you repeat something about them that's inaccurate, misinformed, simply because you read it in some publication by the whites and their offspring, or you heard it, they don't allow you to just sit comfortably repeating misinformation. They force you to go and investigate because it's inaccurate. And even though you've been hearing these things or reading about these things for years, when you repeat that, they don't allow you to comfortably repeat that. They stop you in your tracks and make you go back and investigate because they're telling you, no, that's not accurate. And when you go back and do basic, fundamental, rudimentary investigation, it's easily found and verified. So even with regard to this image of Auset hovering in the form of a falcon over the body of Ausar, and he's erect and so forth, yes, there's some kind of fusion taking place. There's a fertility operant within this scene. However, if you look at the full scene, you see Heru full grown. There's a full male divinity. And you see Auset at the other head of the bed. So clearly she cannot be conceiving Heru when she's standing at the head of the bed and Heru is already full grown at the foot of the bed. So what's actually going on? The first resurrection of Ausar is when he's resurrected and reconstituted so that he can copulate with Auset so they can conceive Heru. Then Heru is born, Heru grows up. There is an episode when Heru is also killed as a child. He dies, and then Auset calls on Ra, and Ra sends Tahuti down from the solar boat in the sky to help her resurrect Heru. That's a piece, and there's also a portion where Heru's hands and arms get cut off and thrown into the water, and Auset as well as Ra directs the crocodile deity Sobek to go into the water to retrieve the hands and arms of Heru to bring them back so he can be reconstituted. These are all part of the story and so forth that most people don't talk about, but they're right there in the text for all to see. But he grows up into a full-grown divinity. Then he engages Set, wages war against Set and his followers, defeats Set and his followers, reestablishes the throne of Ausar, reconstitutes the kingdom and queendom and so forth. And then there's a second resurrection. That second resurrection has to do with Ausar becoming a divinity in creation, in nature and so forth, operating through the star system Sa, so-called Orion, in connection with Ra and so forth, ruling as the chief or head of the divinities. When you look in the chapter 17 of the Runu Pert Imheru, and Atem talks about he's going to make Ausar the head of the various divinities, elevating him to that position, not because Ausar is older than all of the divinities. He's not being placed at the head of the divinities because he's older. There are other deities that are older than Ausar and so forth. But it's just like when a young sovereign, quote-unquote, prince or Aheniba is destined to be the ruler and so forth, the elders and eldresses get together, the kingmakers and so forth. They decide which of the royal children will be the next ruler, and they will place that young male on the throne. He has a council of elders and eldresses, meaning there are other individuals in the community who are older than him, but he has the energetic capacity and the the destiny, the function to function as ruler. So he's placed on that throne by the elders and eldresses. We have that cosmological foundation and precedent established when Atem states in chapter 17 of the Runu Pertinent Meru, so-called Book of the Dead, Book of Coming Forth by Day, that he's placing Ausar at the head of the divinities. There are different texts that talk about that placement. One of them is the Shabaka text, going back to the 25th dynasty. Let's look at the Shabaka text very quickly. We've talked about this with regard to the cosmology of Ptah and his function in creation. But what we're going to do right quick is read a specific section of the Shabaka text dealing with this second resurrection. The first resurrection of Ausar is when his body is found, reconstituted, the different parts of his body are reconstituted, inclusive of the phallus, so that him and Auset can copulate and conceive Heru. Then Heru grows up, wages war against Set, defeats Set and his followers, reestablishes the throne and so forth, and then the second resurrection takes place. In the Shabaka text, they talk about the second resurrection. They talk about it in the beginning of the text. Some of the text is mutilated, and they re-talk about it. They talk about it again. At the end of the text, they just recast it. We're going to go to the end of the text and talk about that section. It says, the great throne that gives joy to the heart of the deities in the house of Ptah is the granary of Ptah, the mistress of all life, through which the sustenance of the two lands is provided, owing to the fact that Ausar was drowned in his water. Auset and Nebuchadnezzar looked out, beheld him, and attended to him. Heru quickly commanded Auset and Nebuchadnezzar to grasp Ausar and prevent his submerging. Set tried to throw Ausar's reconstituted body in the water. Heru directed Auset and Nebuchadnezzar, and in context with himself, we need to grasp him, hurry up, catch the body of our father and your brother, and so forth. Ausar, before it fully submerges, grab that body and draw it out of the water. So it says, Heru quickly commanded Auset and Nebuchadnezzar to grasp Ausar and prevent his drowning, his submerging. So they grasp him, and then they rise him up out of the water, and he's purified. We talked about that notion of quote-unquote baptism when people are dipped in the water and raised up, and they're wrapped up in white cloth and so forth. This is directly where it comes from, that second resurrection of Ausar. So they grasped him, and it says they heated in time and brought him to land. So his body didn't get submerged and go down into the floor of the river and so forth. They grasped him, they heated in time, and brought him to land. They brought him out of the water and resurrected him. Then the text says, Ausar entered the hidden portals in the glory of the masters of eternity, in the steps of him who rises in the horizon, on the ways of Ra, the great throne. He went into the heavenly realm to take up residence in the heavenly realm, in the steps of him who rises in the horizon, talking about Ra, on the great throne. He entered the palace and joined the deities of Ptah, the Lord of years. Thus, Ausar came into the earth at the royal fortress to the north of the land to which he had come. His son Heru arose as king of Upper Kemet, arose as king of Lower Kemet, in the embrace of his father Ausar and of the deities in front of him and behind him. So at this point, Heru was full grown. Of course, Auset and Nebuchadnezzar were there, his mother and his aunt. Heru directed Auset and Nebuchadnezzar, along with himself, to grasp the body of Ausar before he fully sunk under the water. They rose him up out of the water, and then he entered into the hidden portals in the glory of the Master of Eternity, in the steps of him who rises on the horizon, on the ways of Ra, the great throne. He went into the heavenly realm to take his place amongst the deities. This is in the Shabaka text, but when you go back to the earlier text of the Pert and Heru in chapter 17, Atem is talking about this portion, talking about he's making Ausar to be the head of all the divinities. This text operationalizes what Atem declares there. But then we can go back to the pyramid text and talk about by what means did they reconstitute or revivify Ausar. First they grabbed his body, pulled it out of the water, and they're saying this in a summary fashion in the Shabaka text. It's not fully explained because everybody knew the story, so everybody knew what was up. They're just recounting the story here. But when they say they heated him in time, brought him to land, he entered the hidden portals in the glory of the masters of eternity. In the steps of him who rises in the horizon on the waves of Ra, the great throne, he entered the palace and joined the gods and goddesses of Tatanin, Ptah, Lord of years. How was he able to do so? Once they pulled him out of the water, what was the ritual process by which he was able to enter into the hidden portals? How was he revivified once he was brought out of the water? A ritual process took place. So when you go to the pyramid text, they talk about that ritual process. Heru gave his eye to Ausar. The same eye, and this is key, the same eye that was attacked by Set. And when you look at the text in ancient Kemet, Set attacks and rips out the eye of Heru and so forth. Set takes the form of a black pig and shoots negative energy into the eye of Heru and damages his eye, and Ra tells Heru to rest and recover so his eye can be restored. There's a section talking about how Tahuti participated in the process as well as head Heru to restore the eye of Heru, and then you see the eye of Heru used for fractions and so forth. That left eye of Heru is the moon and is reconstituted, so when the moon is ripped out, the light of the moon is ripped out and becomes a dark moon and so forth, and you're talking about with regard to the eclipses and so forth, and then the light returns, talking about Set blasting Heru's eye, but then it's reconstituted by Tahuti as well as head Heru. Then that reconstituted eye becomes a talisman of healing. This is when Heru is in the battle with Set. That means Heru is full grown. He's a fully grown adult male, so to speak, fighting against Set. And that's when his eye is torn out. That's key because once his eye is restored and becomes a talisman for healing, then the grown male deity, Heru, utilizes that healing eye and gives it to Ausar to revivify Ausar. That's that second resurrection. So, in the pyramid text, we're not going to read through that whole section, but in the pyramid text of Ptah, it says, Hail Ausar Ptah, the king, Ensu, so-called Pharaoh Ptah, who made his transition, identifying with Ausar. Having made his transition, he says, Heru has come, he has counted you with the deity. That means Ausar is already being counted with the deities, just like the Shabaka text says, just like the pertinent Heru says. Heru has counted you with the deities. Heru loves you. He has filled you with his eye. He has joined his eye to you. Heru has opened your eye that you may see therewith. The deities have lifted up your face and they love you. Auset and Nebuchadnezzar have made you strong. Heru departs not from you. Behold, his Ka, he rests on you, you live. You have received the word of Heru, you rest upon it. Heru hearkens, never fails. He never fails you. He makes the deities to be your followers. So Heru has given his eye to Ausar, so Ausar is revivified. So after, and then they talk about Auset and Nebuchadnezzar make you strong. This is the pyramid text, earliest text in existence. Then in the 25th dynasty, thousands of years later, in the Shabaka text, you have them talking about Heru, Auset, and Nebuchadnezzar, making sure Ausar's body is not submerged. They draw him out of the water, bring him up to land. Then he enters into the hidden portals. But how does he do that? The pyramid text give the details. He's revivified with the eye of Heru, strengthened, revivified, coming back to consciousness. The spirit enters back into that sacred shrine, that reconstituted body. And, of course, our physical bodies are mummified because they become the greatest shrines. They become a crystallized form. When they're mummified, that body becomes hardened or crystallized, becomes a great crystal, and therefore a great magnet, the greatest magnet for the spirit of the person. So, therefore, when we engage in ancestral religious ritual at the cemetery or at the shrine, at the tomb, and so forth, that physical body is the greatest shrine. Of course, when we set up shrines in our homes, sometimes we have pictures of the ancestor or the ancestors. That is a magnet for their spirit as well. We set up a sculpture for them, and that becomes a magnet that they can take up residence in to communicate with us temporarily. But if you have the actual physical body that's actually mummified and hardened into a crystal itself, that becomes the greatest shrine imaginable, because that's the physical body that the person's spirit used to dwell in when they lived on earth. So that's why we mummify. Now, architects, they talk about Heru, Auset, and Nebuchadnezzar resurrecting Ausar. In the pyramid text, thousands of years prior, they're talking about the process by which it was done. Heru giving the eye, revivifies Ausar and so forth, and then Auset and Nebuchadnezzar make him strong. So they go into some more details. Then they talk about the ladder that Ausar climbs to go up into the heavens and so forth. He becomes placed at the head of the different deities, just as the text of the Heru says later, without him making him the head, he makes that declaration. Heru makes sure that that takes place and so forth. So the different steps in the process are addressed in various texts. But when they say Auset and Nebuchadnezzar make him strong, how does that happen? When you look at this image, talking about the second resurrection, and this is why we show this image, this particular image, Heru is grown, he's at the foot of the bed. Auset is grown, of course, full grown as a woman, female divinity. She's at the head of the bed. Heru is at the foot. How does Auset make him strong? If Heru gives the eye to revivify Ausar and draw his spirit into the body, into the shrine, the mummified body, which is the shrine, how does Auset then make him strong? He's revivified, returned, reconstituted by the eye of Heru, but then Auset makes him strong. How does that happen? When you look at the actual image, the reason why there's a bird, a sacred falcon, with the name Auset right next to it, showing that that's Auset's falcon, and she's hovering over the erect Ka or phallus of Ausar, there's a fusion once again. Sometimes we engage in copulation for, of course, to give birth, to bring ancestors back into the world. So we can have children, have progeny, and so forth, but to bring ancestresses back into the world. That's the major purpose of copulation, but then that's a primary purpose. For the secondary purpose for copulation, you're not always engaged in copulation simply to bring children into the world or ancestresses and ancestors back. The other function of copulation, it says Auset and Nebuchadnezzar, but Auset in particular made Ausar strong. So when you engage in copulation outside of procreative activity, it's the fusion of the male and female, not for the fertility to bring an ancestor or ancestors back into the world, but to empower ourselves and bring purification, recalibration of our energy complexes once again. We can have disparate, activities, behaviors, and dissipate our energy to a certain extent, but when we fuse together with our complementary opposite, with our divine complementary opposite, our spouse, Afurakani male, Afuraitkaitnit female, of course, there's no dissexuality that's insane. There's no miscegenation or race mixing that is perverse and insane and disordered. We're talking about the Afurakani male and Afuraitkaitnit female of the proper age, of course, fusing together our divine complementary opposites, sanctioned and governed by the Abosom who govern our heads, and our ancestresses and ancestors, our Nananom Unsamafo, of our blood circles and so forth, matriclan and patriclan ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated, sanctioned by them. When we come together with the person we should be with, then we are two halves of a whole. We must come together periodically to balance one another out. and strengthen one another. And of course, we don't just give birth to human beings, meaning progeny. We also give birth to nation building. We give birth to ideas. We give birth to activities. We give birth to the things that we need to birth into the world. We utilize that procreative space to fuse together, utilize the energy of Het Heru to bond with one another through divine law, quote-unquote love and so forth, so that we can not only procreate with regard to human beings, but also to bring into being those innovations and those things we need to perpetuate the Oman, perpetuate the nation. Not only artistic inventions, scientific inventions, trainings, or whatever we need for nation building, medicine, cultivation of food, governance, whatever we need, whatever kind of wisdom, intelligence that we need to draw from the deities and ancestral spirits and so forth, we engage that ritual process. Ritual prayer is one way to tap into the wisdom of the divinities and the ancestors and ancestors. Ritual prayer is one way. Ritual song is one way. Ritual dance is one way. Ritual chant is one way. There are different gateways to the ancestral realm. Some gateways are more fiery, like ritual dance, when people are dancing and twirling and so forth, and they propel themselves into the trance state and go into the spirit realm. Some people, through ritual song, is a cooler gateway to get into the trance state and go into the ancestral realm. Ritual prayer is another gateway to the ancestral realm. Ritual chant is one gateway to the ancestral realm. But of course, ritual procreative activity with your spouse is another one of those gateways to the ancestral realm, connected to different organs of the body and so forth, every different gateway. We utilize all of these different gateways in balance. This is one of the major gateways, the same procreative force, life force energy that brings children into the world or brings ancestresses and ancestors back into the world. That same procreative power given to us by Ra and Ra'et, a portion of their procreative power, also brings not only the actual ancestresses and ancestors into the world, but also draws the wisdom of the ancestral clans into the world through that procreative activity, that copulating, ritual copulation and so forth. So we strengthen our own bodies, strengthen our life force injuries, strengthen our spiritual immunity, but also draw in the wisdom of the ancestresses and ancestors, that inherited, accumulated wisdom that exists within our clans. We can attune to that through that ritual process so that we can stimulate growth and development and fortify the Oman, the nation that we are a part of, we are a component part of. We are cells within this organal structure. Just like your body cells must be rejuvenated so that your immunity can stay strong, so you can constantly live your life harmoniously and repel disorder, repel bacteria, repel viral agents and so forth. We need to constantly renew and rejuvenate ourselves, empower ourselves, fortify ourselves so we can perpetuate not only ourselves but also the Oman, which is a living, breathing entity in and of itself. That's why the proper understanding of an Oman and nation is key. Nationism is key. Understanding that a nation is a living, breathing entity, and we are component parts of that living, breathing entity, and living in harmony with the deities that govern that living, breathing entity. So when they say Auset makes him strong, and you see Auset at the head of the bed, Heru full grown at the foot of the bed, and the bird of Auset in the form of a falcon is hovering over the phallus of Ausar, the Ka of Ausar, and there's a copulation taking place. That is Auset sending her Ba, her divine living energy. Just like you have a Ba, divine living energy, you have a Ka, which is the soul, the deity dwelling in the head region. The Ba is a little bird with the head of the human being, or sometimes just the bird, also with a bowl of burning incense in the front. That's that fiery energy. So when you see the Ba bird, meaning the life spirit, the animating spirit, the fire is talking about fire energy, life force energy. The bird with the wings is talking about animation. So the animated wings, fire, the animating fire that's surging through you, your energetic connection to the energy of the various deities in creation, the forces in nature, and the ancestresses and ancestors and all plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afurakani, human life, and all created entities in creation. Your energetic link to them is the Ba and Ba'at, the divine living energy surging through you. that is a portion of the divine living energy of Ra and Ra, the Creator and Creatrix, that's permeating all of creation. You can direct that divine living energy within your body to your legs, to your mind, to your arms, to empower yourself, but also spiritually to attune to the forces in nature and other people. This is how we get possessed, making that energetic link with that life force energy within our spirit bodies, the spirit body of the deity, and that bridge of energy is a connection through which they travel and possess us and so forth. So you can direct that life force energy, just like in martial arts, you can direct basic life force energy to your hands to break boards and so forth. But spiritually, we can direct that bird, that flying, living, animate force of fire throughout our spirit body and so forth to connect with other people, our people, of course, only, to plant life, animal life, mineral life, so we can connect with the energy complexes of these living entities, to connect with the ancestresses and ancestors, connect with the deities. This is what we do. So when you see that bird hovering over Ausar, that is Auset directing her Ba, her divine living energy, to fuse with the Ba of Ausar, because that physical body of Ausar is the mummified body. But his Ba, his divine living energy, is dwelling within that body. So she's connecting her Ba'et with his Ba. That's the fusion of Ausar and Auset spiritually. They blend their energy, and her energy makes him strong. They say Auset makes him strong. This is what's taking place. This is one of those entities or situations, instances, where this is not procreative activity for the purpose of copulation to bring in an ancestor or ancestress, but there's a fusion of male and female energy for a different kind of birth, to make Ausar strong, to fuse that spirit together for his second resurrection. That second resurrection allows him to go up that ladder that leads from the physical world to the spirit realm, and he can take his place as leader, the male leader amongst the deities, and Auset is the female leader amongst the deities and so forth, and fulfill that role that Atem declared for him to have in the Runu Pert Hemeru and so forth, and of course is recast in the Shabaka text. This is what's happening at this time of the year, that second resurrection. First, you had the copulation at the balancing point of the year, the equinox, the evening point. That was a conception, end of the warm cycle, beginning of the seeding cycle, the conception cycle, so that there's a copulation taking place or a conception taking place. The land had to be fertilized, be fertile and alive and so forth in order for that conception to take place. So the land is well watered, fertilized, and so forth, so a conception can take place. That's the first resurrection. But then the second resurrection, for copulation, the second resurrection is at the springtime, at the spring equinox, the Fethel Beri, the beautiful time, and so forth, when there's a fusion of Ausar and Auset. Their energy is fused together. There's a renewal that takes place, a purification, a ritual purging that takes place, and then Ausar can ascend into the heavenly realms, and of course the sun begins to ascend to its highest height day after day after day after day after the spring equinox until it reaches its highest height at the summer solstice. Ausar is following in the steps of Ra, he who is on his great throne and so forth, just as it says in the text, in the Shabaka text, operating through the star system Sa and so forth, the head of the deities in creation. So that's that second resurrection. That's what's happening with us now. We're going through that second resurrection, that purificatory process. We're in the midst of that 13-day process leading up to the spring equinox and on to the last day, which is March 25th, of our APOO observance. And we have the AKYISAN Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference on that day. So this is what's taking place. We're in the midst of that cycle. The new moon was yesterday. We're still feeling the effects of that. Of course, Ausar and Auset are connected to the moon. There's a purification process taking place, and we wanted to point that out so you can take advantage of this shift in energy. Part of that process we talked about last Abinada Tuesday, talking about purifying the head, the Akra ceremony, purifying the head at the shrine for the Akra, the shrine for the head and so forth, the head divinity, 7 days in a row starting last Binada, which was Tuesday, Monday, Joda tomorrow is the 7th day. And then, of course, for some people who can engage that process, fasting on Benada, which is the 8th day, which is the day of the equinox and so forth. And then on those 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th days, we have ritual offerings given to the Nananoman, Samanfo, Asaseafu, and Asasiya, the Earth Mother divinities. And then we have our AKYISAN conference on Awusida Sunday. So we just want to make people aware of that. So when you're engaged in these ritual processes, you will take that into consideration and take advantage of this shift in energy. This is why we calibrate our APOO observance towards the equinox, whereas in Ghana, they have it in April. But for us, we're living in this region of the Earth Mother's body. We are feeling the full effects of the shift from winter, the winter solstice, around December 20th and so forth, and that shift moving to March 20th. There's a marked shift in energy, and we take advantage of that ritually and so forth, so we must tailor our culture to where we exist in this region of the Earth Mother's body. This is what Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people do. We don't simply imitate what people are doing on the continent and say, well, that must be African because that's what they're doing. We are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people wherever we exist. We are children of Afura and Afuraiet, the creator and creatress. Our souls, our Ka and Kayat, are derived from the great Ka and Kayat, the great male-female divinity who animate the black substance of space. So we are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people as well. When we migrate to this region of the Earth Mother's body, we must acclimate ourselves to this region of the Earth Mother divinities, and our ritual practices reflect that reality within which we live. The same has taken place with our people in West Afuraka, Afuraikai, and Central and so forth. The Akhan people didn't always live in the regions of today's Ghana and Ivory Coast. They were prior to that, we were further up in the regions of where Mali and parts of Mauritania are now in the Empire of Ghana. Prior to that, we were in ancient Khanat and Kemet. So as we move to different places, different regions of the Earth Mother's body, different climates and so forth, riverine areas, mountainous areas, desert areas, forest areas, the expression of the culture changes to fit the region within which we find ourselves so we can be in harmony with that region of the Earth Mother's body. So the culture has changed as well. Slight differences, but foundationally, we're dealing with the same deity. Slightly different expressions. And the same thing naturally occurs when we shift and move to the Western Hemisphere. We tailor our culture and expression based on the reality within which we exist and our interfacing with the deities, the Earth Mother divinities first and foremost, as they manifest in this region, and of course the unique expression of the Abosom, Orisha Vodou, in this region of the Earth Mother's body. So, if anyone has any questions or comments, that's all we wanted to touch on today. But we also before we go, the AKYISAN conference is next Sunday. We have our AKYISAN crowd fund, and we have a special deal with the 3 AKYISAN books that we posted today. Today is the last day for that. It was yesterday and today. You can receive all 3 AKYISAN books, volumes 1, 2, and 3, for $30. That includes shipping. The reason we put that sale together, that special together, is because the 3rd book will be published in a few days. And for those who cannot attend the conference, you'll be able to get the book for the conference. People who are attending the conference will be giving that book out for free, as we always do. But if you're not able to attend the conference, you can get the book, and you can get volumes 1 and 2, and this is the 3rd volume. So all 3 volumes for $30. We've had 2 people so far take advantage of that offer, and we appreciate that. But one of the reasons we're doing that, number 1, you can get the book if you aren't able to come to the conference. But number 2, we still are working to raise funds to help cover the expense of the new venue. We shifted to a new venue. It's more expensive, and to assist in the travel expense for our out-of-town presenter. So if you value this work, please support that crowd fund or take advantage of the $30 sale of the 3 books for $30. We put that on for this weekend. We have certain deadlines we have to meet by tomorrow as well as Tuesday, but specifically tomorrow with regard to some of the expenses. So we need some assistance with that because, of course, this is a free conference, and we keep all of our conferences as well as lectures, presentations around the country free. So you can go to the AKYISAN page on our website, or just go to the Nhoma page, the publications page, and take advantage of that sale. Or you can buy one or more of our other books as well. They range from $8 to $11. We also talked about our 10-year anniversary of the release of OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood. This is the 10th year. That book has transformed the lives of hundreds of thousands of Afurakani young males and adults. We've had the free ebook version on our website for years, hundreds of thousands of downloads. Even over the past 12 months, we've received over 17,000 downloads of the book. It's 7 sections, 7 chapters based on the 7 days of the week, 7 principal values of manhood connected to the 7 days of the week and the deities who animate the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7 days of the week. Therefore, every single day of the week, there's an energy complex that governs that day of the week. We have a principal value of manhood that is in harmony with that day of the week. Therefore, you have something to align yourself with. The energy complex that's bathing the earth that day of the week, and the principal value of manhood manifests through that energy complex that places thousands of our people, wherever we are in the world, on the same page with regard to the attuning to that principle of manhood on that day of the week and so forth. The book, one reading of the book, transforms the minds of young adults as well as adult males and so forth. People have transformed their diets, stopped smoking, drinking, utilizing other drugs and so forth. It transforms the way they interface with their spouse, or even reaching out to obtain and connect with their divine complementary opposites, so they become married and have a balanced relationship. The manner in which they interact with family members and children and other community members and so forth, taking on an entrepreneurial spirit, engaging in nation building from a positive, grounded, ancestral, moral foundation and so forth. This all comes from the transformation that takes place from the first reading of OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood. We are able to reach Afurakani men right where they are right now, wherever they exist in the world. When you can download a book for free, wherever you exist in the world, it's one thing to have people with bullhorns walking down the street, chanting and trying to get people to follow a movement and so forth, to get people to come out and follow and all these different things. But when you can have someone's pocket buzz because the phone is in their pocket and it buzzes, and you open up the phone and you see someone has emailed you or posted on your timeline a link to the book. No matter where people are, you can download that free book wherever you exist in the country, in the world. You can download that free book immediately, and we can transform people right where they are, inclusive of those individuals who have been forced into the so-called criminal justice system for nonviolent offenses and so forth. People reading the book and ordering the book, or downloading the book and getting that information to people who have been incarcerated, transforming their lives, so when they come out after having served time or been forced to serve time for nonviolent offense and so forth, when they come out, they have a different perspective and they're focused on nation building and restoration from a true Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral moral foundation. We also have our Akwamu distributor option, where anybody, no matter what, any of our people, of course, only, no matter what your prior work history is, you can begin to work immediately by becoming a distributor of our books, an independent distributor, meaning this is your own business. You're not working for us. You get the books from us wholesale. We have 29 books, and the new AKYISAN book will be number 30. You get books wholesale, 60% off, and then sell them retail. So this is what we're doing. Transforming the lives of our people, Afurakani males, and then also providing an opportunity for instantaneous self-employment. We've been doing this for over 10 years, or for 10 years, We have a track record of doing this. We created 2 years ago a crowd fund to assist us in printing out free copies of the softcover version, so we give those out when we have a workshop on OBARIMA, Afurakani Manhood. We give away the free books. We already have the free ebook download. People can purchase the softcover version, but when we have the workshops, we give away a free copy of the book to every young male or adult male who attends, so they can walk away with a free manual of manhood that transforms their life. We would like to give away thousands of copies of this book to every Afurakani male, just like they give away free Bibles and free Qurans. That nonsense, that foolishness, that perversity, they give them away on a regular basis. We should be able to give away a manual of manhood for free to every Afurakani male we come in contact with. We put together a crowd fund to assist us in that process 2 years ago. January made it 2 years. So in the past 2 years, after having 17,000 downloads over the past 12 months and so forth, when you go to the crowdfund page for OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood and it says OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood Training, what you will see is that we have had 8 contributors over the past 2 years. 8 people in 2 years, that's 4 people a year. That's like 1 person every 3 months over the past 2 years. So thousands of people have downloaded the book. We're always receiving accolades and people telling us how it transformed their lives, transformed the lives of their sons, of their husbands, of their, significant others and so forth. But what we need to have is some support. If you value the work and you see the transformative power of the work, then clearly there are more than 8 people in the course of 2 whole years that support the work that we're doing. Social media tends to distract our attention. So when people see something and they like it and they say, oh, this is powerful, they'll click the like button or they'll click share and then they move on. And what ends up happening is the business doesn't get supported because people simply move on. They say, oh, I'm going to support that one day, and they move on. And evidence of that fact, of course, is even just over the past year, we've had like 3 or 4 people contribute to our OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood Training crowd fund over the past year, but we've had 17,000 downloads of the book over the past year. So that, of course, doesn't comport. People are being empowered, but we need to support the work if we want to expand the work. So only if you see value in the work. We don't ask people to support the work we're doing just on general principle. We only ask people to support the work when they've already seen the tangible benefits. This is one of the benefits of putting the work out for free, because people can get it up front, they can study it, they can see how it impacts their lives first, and then when they see a benefit, then if they appreciate it and value it, then they can support it because they already know what the benefit actually is, as opposed to telling people up front, you don't know what's in this book, but you're going to have to pay for it right now, and whether you like it or not, you need to pay us for the book. So we give the book out for free in the ebook version up front, and then you can support. So if you do value the work, if you truly value the work, as we said in the information for the show, our people within less than 4 weeks participated in giving nearly $1 billion to the whites and their offspring for a movie about fictional superheroes. Our people gave about $200 million of that $1 billion. Nearly $250 million we have given in less than a month for a fictional tale about fictional superheroes that also push integration and miscegenation and everything else, bisexuality and anti-revolutionary, anti-resolutionary action. So something that brainwashed our people, we immediately gave nearly $250 million. Something that actually transforms our people tangibly, that we can prove for people in the course of a year. So if you really value the work, please go to the OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood Training site. We posted that on our Facebook page today. It's on the fundraiser site. You can download the free book, of course. You can support the work, but please engage that process. That's part of the process of assisting with, the work that we're doing. But at the same time, also for those who are will not be able to attend the AKYISAN conference, if you support the work that we are doing, take a few minutes now to go to the AKYISAN crowdfund page to support our effort. You can receive a free copy of the book for any donation that you make. Or if you would like to take advantage of the sale that we put forward this weekend, volumes 1, 2, and 3 of AKYISAN, $30 for all 3 volumes, and that includes the shipping. So the shipping is really about $7 or so. So it's really like $22 or $23 for all 3 books, and then plus the $7 shipping. So it's $30 for all 3 books. That includes the shipping. You can go to the Nhoma page, the publications page now, and assist us with that effort. We know that there are more people who value the work that we're doing, so please assist us in that piece. So we just wanted to touch on that information on this special broadcast with regard to that purification and the second resurrection, because that's directly related to this period that we find ourselves in right now, this ritual purification purging period of APOO, which will culminate with the AKYISAN Ancestral Religious Reversion Conference this coming Sunday, Awusida, March 25th here in Washington, D.C. So again, Yerase, we thank you for tuning into our special broadcast, and Yebeshi Abio, we will meet again. What's up?